Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we are checking out Ashes 2036, or is it 2063? It's 2063? 2036? 2020 something. I'm pretty sure it's 2063. Anyway, this is a post-apocalyptic total conversion mod that I've had my eye on for quite a long time, because it looks cool as shit. And finally, I get to play the damn thing, or at the very least, episode 1. Not that I'm complaining or anything, this is a fair chunk of mod for something that bills itself as a first installment, but before I get too ahead of myself, I should probably give you an idea what the basic setup of Ashes 2063 actually is. As it turns out, you play the role of a wasteland scavenger, eking out a meager existence by accruing junk and scrap from the various outposts you visit, while all the while fending off wasteland scumbags such as raiders, mutants, and everything else between. On this particular scavenging trip, however, your character stumbles across more than just the usual junk, instead stumbling across an old radio that firstly is in working condition, and secondly receives a mysterious transmission. And so pretty much begins episode 1. It's a wonderfully simple setup, one that has you traipsing across a radioactive wasteland, meeting new and interesting people, and convincing them of the benefits of switching to a lead-based diet. Yeah, this is certainly a mod that wears its influences plainly on its sleeve, taking inspiration from the likes of Mad Max, Fallout, and pretty much any other post-apocalyptic entry you could care to mention. Another big influence that you may or may not have already noticed is the fact that this owes quite a lot to the design of build engine games, most notably Duke 3D, both in the visual and mapping sense. In fact, I'm pretty sure if I wouldn't have mentioned that this was a Doom mod at the top of the video, a fair few of you may have assumed that this was in fact a Duke mod, but no, this is most assuredly using Doom as its base. But generally, what you get as a result of this is a much greater emphasis on environmental detail. You'll see it in just the textures on the walls, you'll see it on the posters and graffiti that litter the various areas you make your way through. You'll see it in the fact that a lot of these generally tend to be recognizable, realish world places. Shops, burger joints, service stations, albeit with a post-apocalyptic tinge. But what I'm trying to say here is it does a really friggin' good job of making you feel immersed in the world of this mod. Anyway, let's briefly talk about a few of the weapons you'll be starting off with here in Ashes. You'll notice that at the moment I've got about 3 different weapons on regular-ish rotation: the pistol, the revolver, and the pump-action shotty, which you can see getting some fine usage here. And these are essentially the meat and potato weapons of the Ashes arsenal. They'll be sticking by your side the entire way through, and you'll generally find, for the most part, a decent amount of ammunition kicking around. And I say for the most part because another thing that Ashes seems to do well is making you feel like these bullets are precious resources. If you're gonna be letting off a few shots, you best damn well be hitting your mark. Because if you don't hit your mark, you're going to get hit in the fucking face. And the other precious resource you're going to have to then worry about is, of course, your HP. And as it turns out, the post-apocalypse is hazardous to your health. And more so here in Ashes, I've found, because health items are actually quite thin on the ground. I mean, sure, you can find the occasional med pack, but they're very rare. But for the most part, you'll be subsisting on things like tins of beans, and hopefully not getting yourself blown up by the likes of exploding moonshine distilleries. Happily though, it isn't all grim, relentless survivalism in the radioactive wastes. Every so often you'll have the opportunity to visit a bastion of civilization. In this case, the first one you'll visit is located at a dam, and will give you a nice opportunity to chat to the locals, learn a bit more about the world, maybe get a few hints about where the story is headed next, but most crucial of all, stock up on additional supplies. For the most part, this will involve paying a visit to your local watering hole, where you can either have a few drinks to restore smaller increments of health, or a meal to restore a much bigger chunk. You can also visit another vendor in these encampments who will help you out with the ammunition situation, but either way, you're gonna have to be spending some money, and money is accrued through the collection of junk. If you need to know how much money you actually have at any given moment, you can have a little glance down at the bottom right, and just above the ammo counter, it'll have a neat little translation of what all your junk adds up to. You won't have necessarily enough junk to buy absolutely everything you need, however. Med packs are quite expensive, ammunition can be expensive, and you'll have to pick and choose. You'll have to settle on a preference. For me, it boiled down to getting some more of that shotgun ammo, because when you need to put something down quickly, that tended to be the best choice. But as you progress further, the junk does become a little bit more plentiful, and your options do open up as a result. Shortly after this level, you'll get an opportunity to take an extended ride with your trusty motorbike. It's something that you'll have been able to do before this point, but not for quite this length of time. And to be honest, the length of this level does somewhat magnify the flaws of riding the motorbike itself. It's helpful then that at certain points you do in fact get to hop off the thing and deliver a little bit of wasteland justice. Apparently I've run into the one gang that only exclusively hires deaf people, so they didn't hear my motorbike roll up and I get the drop on them. Sucks to be them. But this kind of stuff I kind of appreciate. The ability to go off the beaten track and do a little bit of exploration, potentially get yourself some more ammo and junk as a consequence. And really, back when I played the original demo for this, I thought this would be more of the core game itself. I thought it would consist of the wasteland being some sort of hub where you can visit various outposts and then access certain missions, but I don't mind the more linear nature of what Ashes turned out to be. Ultimately though, you will have to get back on the bike and you're going to have to confront those flaws that I mentioned head on, and chiefly it boils down to the fact that this thing doesn't handle very well at all. It's very twitchy. If you want to make small adjustments, it very noticeably jerks you to the left or right. It's not so bad when you're making bigger sweeping turns, but yeah, for the slow turns it's kind of jarring. And then there's the subject of what happens when you hit the environment, be it at low or high speed. Truth is, you're going to be taking a metric crap ton of damage either way, so my advice, don't. Another significant aspect of Ashes doesn't really make much of an appearance until much later on in the campaign here, and that is the Geiger Counter. Sure, it'll click up a few times during early levels if you wander too close to a radioactive pool, but here in the city, anytime you step outside, that thing is gonna climb. If it starts hitting yellow, you're gonna start losing health, so it's a good idea to minimize the time spent outdoors as much as possible. It certainly lends a very palpable tension to those sections. Thankfully, before you reach this level, you do have an opportunity to visit an encampment with a few very useful vendors, one of which will offer you a variety of stims. For me, I went for the health regen stim because I hemorrhage health like a stuck pig, so that turned out to be quite a good pick for yours truly. Other options include anti-radiation stims, which can help you maximize the amount of time you can spend in irradiated areas, and the other one was a damage enhancement stim, which I'm pretty sure is the equivalent of a berserk pack. Whether that works with projectile weapons or just melee, I'm not entirely sure. Additionally, you can also hit up a vendor in the preceding section for a upgrade, be that in armor or for one of your weapons. For me, I chose my weapon, which was the SMG, which turned it into a much enhanced version of its former self, and let me tell you, it was a much appreciated upgrade. Quite frankly, Ashes does a pretty damn bang-up job of pacing itself out during the course of this episode. You feel like there's a nice sense of progression going from that real sense of scarcity in the first few missions up until this point here in the city, where you're pretty much rocking and a-rolling with everything you could possibly need. I mean, at this point, armory-wise, I've got both pistols, the revolver and the semi-auto, the shotty, I've got the scoped rifle here, which is pretty damn good at taking out the trash hags. I've also got the enhanced SMG, I've got myself the Master Blaster, which is pretty much a cross between a flamethrower and a rocket launcher, and they are pretty much all the tools you need. There's definitely a pipe bomb grenade that you can use, which, to be honest, I never really got the hang of using, and the reason for that is because I think the fuse takes a little too long for it to, actually detonate, so I always felt I had a much better time just, getting in there and shooting things in the face rather than waiting for something to explode. In terms of the enemies that you'll be using these wonderful weapons against, I can't help but feel that Ashes is holding back somewhat when it comes to the roster of enemies you're up against, because at last mental count there was about 6-7 different types of enemy during the course of this episode, and that's not including the boss at the very end. And out of those, you'll spend a lot of time fighting either raiders, bug dogs, or cannibal mutants. And to be honest, by the end it does start to get a bit repetitive. I mean, sure, you've got the bigger, beefier cannibal mutants that come equipped with master blasters, and they essentially fill the function of mini-bosses. You'll see them popping up about 2 or 3 times during the course of this. But personally, I was hoping for a bit more craziness, and that's saying something considering what we're already fighting against. But really, the sky is the limit when it comes to the radioactive post-apocalypse. You can get really weird. That said, though, there is one particular enemy type that you'll encounter during the course of this that really does fit the bill when it comes to weird. Dare I say, spoopy, even. And I'm not showing it during the course of this video because ideally I'd like you to experience that spoopiness for yourself and hopefully have the same reaction as I did, where I just saw it, turned around and noped the heck out of that particular area. It was pretty damn good. I guess what I'm trying to say here in a roundabout way is that no matter how impressive Ashes currently is, and don't get me wrong, it's pretty friggin' impressive, I mean, just look at it, there is certainly room for expansion. Dare I even say improvement if we're going to be talking about things such as the way the motorbike handles. But I'm willing to wait for that. I'm willing to wait for that inevitable episode 2, because let's face it, you don't release something and bill it as episode 1 if you don't have plans for a follow-up. So best not let me down on that front, because I need more of this. Icarus needs more of this. Icarus had a really goddamn fun time playing Ashes. So much so that Icarus is intentionally shying away from showing the final level or going too in-depth on the story, so ideally, my lovely viewers can experience it for themselves. Also, Icarus is talking in the third person now. Kinda weird. So, would I recommend Ashes 2063 Episode 1, Prelude to Electric Boogaloo, a Star Wars story? Yes, of course I would. Where have you been? Have you just skipped to this part of the video to figure out if I'd recommend it or not? What are you doing? Go back, you absolute freeloader, and watch the entire thing. For the rest of you, yes, this is a ridiculously good mod, both in looks and definitely in sound. I'm a big fan of the soundtrack that plays during the course of this, very much reminding me of classics like Escape from New York, and it's just filled with tons of little details, far too many for me to show in one simple video. But yeah, this is one really well-made mod. I mean, if there's one other thing I'd love to point out, is the fact that the layout of these levels as well is pretty damn great. I mean, it's one thing to make them look fantastic, and they most certainly do, but it's another thing as well to make sure that those same levels remain readable and enjoyable to explore and progress through. It's tricky to convey in words, but it's the feeling of being lost in a level without actually being lost. Feeling like you're aimlessly poking around in an unproductive section of level only to find out that it's been funneling you in the right direction all along. That's the kind of thing that certain levels here in Ashes actually achieve, and it feels really good. It's definitely something that's best experienced for yourself. And to that end, if you're interested, the link, as usual, is in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, or maybe you'd like to get your hands on early editions of my latest videos. In either case, you'll find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.